One. Welcome to the Inside Story. I'm Billy Hollowell, and on today's show, I'm joined by Christian Post reporter Leonardo Blair. Leo, there is a New York City church on a mission to make traditional worship cool. Tell us a little bit about this story.
We're talking about Abyssinian Baptist Church in New York City, one of the most iconic churches in the country, and we'll talk more about why it's so iconic later on in this interview. I recently did an interview with their new pastor, Kevin R. Johnson, and he was just sharing that he wanted to keep Abyssinian a traditional Baptist church, and a part of that culture, a part of that identity is to ensure that people come to church dressed in a traditional way. So you're talking about suits and dresses. In the old days, some people would say like frocks. I don't think people are wearing frocks, but people are really wanting to dress nice to support the identity, the cultural identity of this historic, iconic church.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because that is something, back in the day, everybody went to church and dressed nicely, right? This is a more modern phenomenon of people, and I know this has ebbed and flowed over the years, but your Sunday's best, right? Like put on your Sunday's best. That was a statement for a reason. I mean, people showed up and they did that and they got themselves, looking nice to honor God. And churches are very different today. There's a lot of different schools of thought and ideologies around that, but that is really interesting, that they're trying to keep that alive there. And Reverend Kevin Johnson, who we'll talk more about, he's new to the church there, and we'll get into the history of that as well. But you mentioned obviously this church is iconic. It is a church with a lot of history. Tell us a little bit about that history, the beginnings, people who have worshiped there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Abyssinian Baptist Church, what you should know is it's the first Black Baptist church that was established in the state of New York. It was founded in 1808,
Wow.
it went with 11 women and 4 men of color. They asked permission to leave the First Baptist Church on Gold Street in Lower Manhattan, which was a predominantly white congregation. And this was, really a time of, in the 1800s, there were a lot of challenges for the church, and they eventually started to gain national prominence in the 20th century when Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Sr. He pastored from 1908 to 1937, and he moved the church from Midtown to Harlem. And his work just, his work with black and white progressives at the time, continued to push the church to national prominence. And later on, his son, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr., succeeded him. And another significant thing about the church is that it's reportedly one of the first mega churches in America, with a reported membership of over 10,000 people.
Wow. Wow. I love hearing, the history of churches like that and churches that are still very active today. And that brings me to the Reverend Kevin Johnson. Now, he recently was installed as a pastor there, as the lead pastor there this year. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, I mean, he served under. So his him coming to the church. So he was called to the job in June this year, and he started working, doing his duties there in July. But this is his third assignment at Abyssinian, third tour of duty at the church, because he served as an intern and an assistant pastor to the Reverend Calvin Butts the third, who died about 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer. And Mr. Butts had served, I think, almost 3 decades, if my memory serves me correctly. Um, and he's brought a lot of energy to the church. He is married. His wife is a corporate attorney. He's been married for 27 years. They have three kids, and he's a Morehouse graduate. He went to Union Theological Seminary, and he has a doctorate from Columbia University. He has significant pastoral experience. He's coming from a church that he founded, Dare to Imagine, in Philadelphia. He founded, and that church is still going strong.
So interesting history and past there. Now I know there's also been some legal drama surrounding Johnson and his installment there at the church. Can you explain that? Help people understand what's going on there.
Yes, so that has, the drama, the legal drama has it has attracted a lot of, or generated a lot of national headlines. So the Reverend Ebony Marshall Turman, she's a Yale Divinity School professor who made history when she became the youngest pastor ordained at Abyssinian in 2007. She was she was a sort of protege of Calvin Butts as well. And she had hoped to take over Mr. Butts's job as the first female pastor when he died. But when she wasn't named a finalist for the job by the church's search committee, uh, Turman filed a federal lawsuit, um, accusing the church and the search committee of gender discrimination. Uh, Abyssinian's legal team has denied these allegations, and they have filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit. And the court has ordered a stay of the discovery process in her lawsuit, pending the outcome of the motion to dismiss. Uh, Shortly after the Reverend was installed on September 29th as Abyssinian's new pastor, four longtime members also asked a Manhattan judge to nullify the vote that led to Reverend Johnson's quote unquote illegal election, along with some other actions. They argued that to get a new pastor, the new pastor needs to get votes from a majority of all the church members who are eligible to vote, not just those who cast ballots. And Johnson really won his election with 672 votes, which is more than half of the people who voted, but it constitutes only 25.3% of the 2,655 eligible voters of the church. So those are the two lawsuits that are, you know, uh, making headlines, and the church is trying to address those.
Well, it's hard to when you have this historic church. I think there's a lot on the line there, and so people, they have an affinity to that, and so you understand why some of these debates and legal dramas do unfold. But I want to end on more of a positive note for Reverend Johnson, because you also spoke with him about the election, about the call of the church. These are actual issues that are very important, and we're in very divided and chaotic times right now. What did he have to say about the presidential election and what he believes the role of the church is?
Yeah, I mean, he was very measured in his response about the election. He did acknowledge that the church itself, a lot of the large churches, they seem to have been divided along racial lines in terms of which candidate they supported. Uh, but one of the things he believes, that if Christians would focus on being Matthew 25 believers, these divisions can be overcome. And he does not advocate the politicizing of the gospel. And his argument that when this happens, if churches choose not to be uh, a Matthew 25 church, or they choose not to be Matthew 25 Christians, the gospel that they preach is a cheap gospel. So that's his message to the church.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, these are important messages for crazy times. Leo, appreciate your time today breaking this story down. Everyone else, you can head on over to the Christian Post. Make sure you read the news there daily. You will see Leonardo's incredible work. Appreciate your time today.
Anytime, Billy. Thank you.
We'll be back next week with another episode of The Inside Story. We'll see you then.